discussion, Bosnian Chronicle by Ivo Andric. This is the second part. I've already spoken in the first part about political aspects of the novel. In this formal discussion of the book, I want to focus on the novelistic side of things. So I particularly want to emphasize the human condition. So Andric is a first part of the 20th century author. He won the Nobel Prize in the 1960s. So that's his time period. And he's deeply embedded in the Russian tradition of showing the human condition through meticulous detail and psychological description of how people feel. So I would say this is the biggest takeaway from this novel. It's a beautiful novel, highly recommended, because it's well done. It's just crafted in a very, very professional, novelistically amazing way. The plot is also very interesting. So you have the entrance of the French consul in the early 19th century to the town of Travnik, a Bosnian town that is occupied by the Ottoman Empire and is used by the Ottoman Empire as the place where the vizier is stationed. In other words, this is the governor's mansion, or the place from where the governing happens, which is the overlords in Istanbul govern Bosnia, and Travnik is the place, sort of the representative place. So it's the whole story is during the Napoleonic Wars from, let's say, 1802 to 1814. So the whole story starts with the entrance of the French consul into Travnik, and then later on the Austrian consul follows, and then we have the whole perspective of world affairs from the human perspective of these consuls and all the people around them. Bosnia being a place where four religions live together, so all of these aspects are being described, and again focus on the human way. So this is what I want to talk about in this particular episode. It is how Ivo Andric's craftsman's-like describing the human condition in a transcendent way and also in a specific local way, and therefore I think it's a really, really amazing novel from that perspective. This is another Imrong podcast. It's May 13th, 2023. This is Kripdelko. It's a Saturday. There's no update. For the year, we are up 36.1%. The market is up 8.5%. We're outperforming by 25.6%. So Ivo Andric, Bosnian Chronicle. I read the book in English. My command of the Serbo-Croatian language, or again, it's a bit complicated to even talk about the language that Ivo Andric wrote in, and that has to do with the history of Bosnia, which I'm mentioning here because it's important. Bosnia has been a torn country for centuries, and I think Bosnian Chronicle really explains why. And I've spoken about this in the first part where I talked about the political aspects. So I just want to mention it here again. It was torn by different empires, in particular by the Ottoman Empire, ruled by the Ottoman Empire, and in my view, ruled in a very bad way because there was no integration. There was always separation. And the groups that have been living together under the overlords of the Ottomans have not been able to reconcile themselves, have not been able to build a civic national culture. And that is what is still the problem in Bosnia today. And it starts with the language. You can't even exactly say what language that Ivo Andric's, Travničke Kronike was written, because in those days it was probably called Serbo-Croatian. Today you would call it Croatian because he was Croatian, but maybe he was also writing it in Serbian because he was part of the Yugoslav, social republic, which was probably dominated by Serbia. I'm not even sure, but anyway, look, it's a complicated story. The contemporary political story and the sort of last century of that part of the world has been very complicated. There's been kingdoms, there's been socialism, and now there is nationalism. So it's really you go from one bad place to the other, and unfortunately, these people are not able to really find a way to live together, and that's how it is, and that's how it's probably going to be for a long time. But I've spoken about this again in part one. I want to focus on the literary part. So, Bosnian Chronicle is a beautiful description of the human condition in a transcendent way and in a local way. Let me start with a transcendent way. And the most important thing is that the main character, the French consul here, is portrayed as a human that is trying to do the right thing, that is trying to be good, and good in a not in a Kantian way. There's no categorical imperative or anything like that. Maybe Andric was influenced by it. It's not a virtue signaling type of character. The way Andric is building this character, it's a person that is very pragmatic, that takes care of himself, but takes care of his people and tries to build relationship with the people that he's exposed to, good or bad. He's somebody that makes friends with almost anybody, that is able to coexist with all kinds of different characters. There is a couple of scenes in the book where he's exposed to Ottoman viziers, so the governors of the Ottoman Empire, who come in different shapes. Some of them are enlightened, interesting characters. Some of them are tyrants. But Deville, the actual character, is able to build those relationships, and that transcends towards the end, where there's a scene in the book where he talks to a Jewish member of the community of Travnik, and he's being basically told that he has been the most tolerant, the most friendly person in the whole community, and he gets rewarded for that. It doesn't matter what the actual plot is here, but I think what Andrich is trying to get across here, from my point of view, is that this person, who is an imperial consul, who is a consul that is employed by Napoleon, who in those days, I think you can fairly say that Napoleon was probably considered something like Hitler. I mean, he was terrible. He brought bloodshed. He killed a lot of people. Yes, some of the ideas that he was trying to propagate were probably good, freedom and those sort of things. However, the way it was done, it was really done through bloodshed. So no matter what, he was, and this person, Deville, was the representative of this bloodshed-thirsty emperor who was really trying to conquer Europe. And nevertheless, he's being portrayed as a human that you want your children to be like. And I think this is the key. Okay, when it comes to how should you behave, there's no there's a lot of you can have that conversation about what is the right way to behave, what is moral imperative, and all those sort of things. To me, it's very simple. How do I want my children to behave? What will make me proud? That's what I think moral and ethical knowledge and ethical behavior and all that kind of stuff is. So Deville is that type of person, and that's what Andrich has been, successfully been able to portray. Now, I don't know if that was his intention. I haven't read anything about the book or any kind of comments or interviews with Andrich about the book or anything like that. So I'm usually doing this after my review because I don't want to be biased. So Deville is. He's not the idiot in Dostoevsky's The Idiot. He's not that type of person. He's not a naive, good-hearted, Jesus type, person. He doesn't transcend hierarchies, none of that stuff. That's not Deville. Deville is a person that is embedded in the power structure of his time, that is very conscious of that. He doesn't take any prisoners when it comes to that. He's very clear who he is, but he has a heart. He has a human aspect. He has a heart. And again, when I say human, what I mean is he has all the things that I would consider absolutely necessary for a human being to be considered somebody you want your children to be like. He has humility. He shows mercy. He shows understanding. He shows empathy. So he shows the ability to change. He has a very friendly way to, let's say, expose himself to all kinds of really harsh events. I mean, we're talking about the Napoleonic Wars. This is no joke in terms of how people were, treated and what people had. And nevertheless, he survives. He gets through things. It's not clear what ends up happening to him after Napoleon, gets defeated and all that. But the way Andrich leaves sort of the the he leaves a trace here, which is, I would say, two words. I think it's going to be all right. That's the feeling you get away with. I think it's going to be all right. This is sort of the way I see it. I could be wrong, but that's the way I see it. But that's not the point. Again, this book is it's a classical book in the sense that it's not so important what actually happens. And the reason it's not so important is because the human aspect of things, the actual human behavior, the psychology, is a lot more center point here. And I really I can't emphasize this enough. So again, Deville is showing what good humanity looks like in Ivo Andric's world. You can argue about it, of course. There are certain things that he is not. He's not a fanatic. He's not a Jacobin. He is a practical, pragmatic human being, something that you want your kids to become. There is a lot of other characters in the book, and I don't want to go into details, but there's, Andrich plays really well with contrasts. So he contrasts, let's say, the Deville's character with another character, the Austrian consul, which is very different. And I think you get a bit of a sense now. This is now from the sort of transcendent psychology. Let's get to the more local psychology, meaning the psychology of the time. You have France, which is a violent sort of teenager that is trying to grow up, trying to become something new, that is full of potential, full of hope, and also full of destruction because of that. And then you have the stiffness of the Austrian Empire, and you have the stiffness and brutality of the Ottoman Empire, which is portrayed as a sort of overlord, dysfunctional type of empire. Again, this is the political side of things. I don't want to go into this too much in this particular episode. I would say that definitely Andrich has not a lot of sympathy for the Ottoman Empire, for good reason. I don't think the Ottoman Empire has done anything good to the people that they've subdued, other than extracting taxes from them and fueling their own huge appetite for power and things along those lines. It is what it is. I, again, don't want to talk too much politics here, but I think what Andrich is doing really well is the contrasts. He's playing with the contrasts, and he's also including the human condition of all the people there, the peasants, the begs, which are the Bosnian Muslims that sort of run the place on behalf of the Turkish overlords. There's the Jewish population, the Sephardic Jews, which got kicked out of Spain in the 15th century or 16th century at the Reconquista, and then live in places around Eastern Europe. There's the Catholics and the Orthodox people. They all have their voice. I would say the one thing that Andrich probably hasn't done really well is given a voice also to the actual Bosnians. He hasn't done that. I guess he must have been biased. There's no voice of, let's say, the peasants, the people who are actually living there, that aren't, merchants or viziers or consuls and things along those lines. That voice is missing. But again, it is what it is. I don't think that I need to discuss this further. I think the voices that you hear are clear and loud, and that is something that is definitely a good thing.
I think, because you get a sense for a certain period of time that is really crucial for Europe. You get a sense for how it must have been for these people and what it meant to live in those times. And I think, again, I can't emphasize. Um, I think, Andrich is definitely sort of in the tradition here of a Lestagner, Dostoevsky, show the world the human condition, and that's really beautiful. So he's done a fantastic job. I think I don't want to talk too much about uh, some of the intricacies here because it's a very long, it's a tome. It's one of those novels that you really have to embed yourself in and live with it, which I've done. You can do it. It opens up the door. I think before I finish, I just want to sort of put this into context also. First and foremost, for new listeners, why do I talk about books here? The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. Reading is part of the business of a hedge fund manager. Putting yourself in the thoughts and being exposed to the thoughts of novelists, of authors, is conditioning of the mind and a very important part of the business. So that's why we're doing this. The other thing I would like to discuss here is the the actual personal aspect. So I've just finished Orhan Pamuk's book, The Museum of Innocence, and then I've chosen to read Ivo Andric's book, and I think this is sort of, for me, kind of like a bit of a homecoming, that I'm finally reconciling my own ancestry through two incredibly important novels. Why? Because they discuss they discuss the places that my ancestry is from. My ancestry is from what today is Bosnia, and the place has been torn in many ways. I think Pamuk shows a beautiful picture of Turkey in the 1970s. So it's a post-Ottoman Turkey, but there's a lot of traces of the Ottoman Empire and all the things that sort of transcended that empire and still are transcending. And then we have Ivo Andric, who is, let's say, who wrote 30, 40 years before Pamuk. His story is, of course, in the Napoleonic Wars, so it's much earlier, but it doesn't matter because a lot of it transcends. And what transcends is this, this really, almost tragic human condition that the whole of Europe was exposed to for centuries, which is be conquered, fight, be chased away, live under slavery, live under pseudo-slavery.
There's a scene in the book where I think he encompasses the path of the human condition. He said there is no path. It's kind of a circle go around with new characters showing up all the time. But you as a person, you as an individual, you don't have a path. But I think this is the crucial difference between Ivo Andric and everybody else. I think he gives you that opening. He says there could be a path for you. Now, he chose socialism. He was a functionary in Yugoslavia under Tito. And you can't blame him for that. People probably must have thought after World War II there has to be a better path than this mess that we've been living with for centuries. Now, it turns out to be the wrong one, but at least he tried. I think the right path is the United States, what the United States did. The opening of the United States, the opening of a door of freedom, the opening of a lifestyle that allows you to build something that is better for the next generation. This is the crucial difference between what the United States as a symbol, I'm not talking about the country today, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of problems today, but the opening of the Constitution and the foundation of the United States on the pillars of liberty and on the pillars of aristocratic, rational thinking and tolerance and humility. That opening is a chance for humanity to start the journey to infinity as is described in David Deutsch's book. That is the opening. We have a chance. We have a political door that was opened up, where human ingenuity, liberty, freedom, humility, and the human condition, as it's described in Andric, as it's described in many other great novelists, has a chance to flourish. Thank you.